Dr. Parvez Amir Ali Hudboy is a nuclear physicist who teaches at LUMS Lahore and at Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad. He received his BS, MS and PhD degrees from MIT and remains an active physicist who often lectures at US and European research laboratories and universities. Dr. Hudboy received the Baker Award of Electronics and the Abdus Salam Prize for Mathematics. Dr. Hudboy created and anchored a series of TV programs on Pakistan's education system and 2 other series that aimed at bringing scientific concepts to ordinary members of the public. He is the author of Islam and Science, Religious Orthodoxy and the Battle of Rationality. As the head of Mashal Books in Lahore, he leads a major translation effort to produce books in Urdu and promote modern thought, human rights, and emancipation of women in 2011. In 2011, he was included in the list of 100 most influential global thinkers by Foreign Policy magazine. Yes, I think.
Thank you very much. The introduction was perhaps excessively kind. There is perhaps no issue in Pakistan which excites more emotion and excitement than the nuclear issue. And I should say that outside of Pakistan, nuclear weapons have given to Pakistan a very special place. Now, that's not a place that's always nice. In fact, it's not a nice place that we get. But then these are issues that need to be understood, to be thrashed out in public discussion. Today we have 3 speakers who have often written and spoken on the issue of nuclear weapons and Pakistan. They are people who have sometimes represented the country and its nuclear position, or they have helped create or defend the nuclear national narrative. They are Dr. Zafar Iqbal Chima, who got his PhD from the War Studies Department at the University of London, King's College at the University of London. There's Dr. Zulfiqar Khan, who has just published a book. It's called Pakistan's Nuclear Posture. He teaches at the National Defense College in Islamabad. And we have a speaker from the previous session who now needs no further introduction, Mr. Najmuddin Sheikh, former Foreign Secretary of Pakistan. All KLF speakers are, of course, at liberty to say what they want, how they want, but not as long as they want. That's pretty much limited to 10 minutes. 11, if we're generous. Before I invite the first speaker, I would want to put before them and all of you 3 key nuclear questions. Questions that have bothered my mind, questions that should bother your mind as well, and questions whose answers I would dearly love to have. First, I'd love to know what nuclear weapons have done for Pakistan. At the time of the nuclear tests in May of 1998, it was said that nuclear weapons would give to the country permanent security and stability. But unless I am wrong on this, Pakistan today appears less confident of its security and stability than at perhaps any other time in the past. In 1998, army officers could proudly walk out into the public and they would be respected and saluted. Today, they cannot wear their uniforms in public by official orders because of the threat to their lives. Today, we have blockades and barricades in Islamabad, the heart of Pakistan. Today we have a massive insurgency in Balochistan. And if you look at what the world is saying about us, it's saying that, well, we may not be a failed state, but we certainly are not a successful state. So I would like to know from the speakers, what have nuclear weapons done for Pakistan? A second question would be, it is said that Pakistan has the world's fastest growing nuclear arsenal. It is said to have now upwards of 100 or 120 warheads, and shortly, if this rate of growth is maintained, our nuclear arsenal will exceed that of Britain's. Pakistan has not denied it. At the same time, Pakistan has almost single-handedly blocked the fissile material cut-off negotiations in Geneva at the Conference of Disarmament. So, my question to the distinguished speakers will be, does this mean that Pakistan has decided to become an outlier? And if it has, what are the costs that will have to be paid for this position? My third and last question, and I hope this will also be addressed by them, none of them have to be, is that as we gather over here, maybe a couple of hundred people, well, there will be probably 200,000 people at the Defy Pakistan rally at the Quaid-e-Azam Mazar today. At that Defy Pakistan rally, there will be Hafiz Saeed of the Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jamaat-ud-Dawa, whatever. There will be other organizations that have been banned by the government of Pakistan earlier. Lashkar-e-Taiba is the organization that carried out the Mumbai attacks. And now all this has something very much to do with nuclear weapons, because groups that have been nurtured and received sustenance on the soil of Pakistan have felt secure because they had the protection of nuclear weapons behind them. This is what accounted for the Kargil episode in 1998-99. This is what perhaps accounted for the 13th of December attack, 2001, on the Indian Parliament. And when Mumbai took place, although India wanted to retaliate, it could not because of Pakistan's nuclear weapons. So my question is, has the Pakistani military establishment now decided that by setting Lashkar-e-Taiba on the loose, that it wants more Mumbais? And that does it still believe that nuclear weapons are going to be a permanent and total deterrent to any Indian action, including that of Operation Cold Start? These are tough questions. As I said, you are at liberty to ignore all of them or address some of them, and I shall be most interested in your answers. So with that, I shall invite Dr. Zafar Iqbal Cheema to give his talk at this point.
Assalamu alaikum, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I express my profound gratitude to Oxford University Press and the British Council for organizing such an excellent and very large gathering of literary personalities. I'm very thankful for them for publishing my book on this subject last year. So let me not say what I had in mind to say, but directly come to questions raised by Professor Hudbai. who and me have been colleagues at the Quaid-e-Azam University for almost 25 years. I belong to the Department of Defense and Strategic Studies and Dean of Social Sciences at the Quaid-e-Azam. What have nuclear weapons done for Pakistan? Before we focus on Pakistan, what has nuclear weapons done for anyone else in the world? And what can be done with nuclear weapons? From a humanistic and moral perspective, I say with my total honesty, it is difficult to justify the possession of nuclear weapons. But are we living in an idealist world? In my opinion, the world is more or less dominated by the realist paradigm. A world there is a hierarchy of great powers. And when the United States dropped 2 atomic weapons on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the lesson was, with this immense devastation, not immense devastation, but indiscriminate devastation of children, old people, animals, anything which could be destroyed was destroyed. And the lesson was that the nuclear weapons are not weapons of military use and they must not be developed. But the United States of America went ahead with not only banning or putting a global ban on nuclear weapons, it went for possession and monopolizing the development of nuclear weapons and deny it to other rival powers and friendly powers. It miserably failed, and I do not want to repeat the history of how P5 developed and then T3 developed. India, Pakistan and Israel, and now we see on the rise of the horizon Korea and Iran, possibly another 2 nuclear weapons. I quote Margaret Thatcher and President Reagan that nuclear weapons are the anchor sheet of peace in Europe and during the Cold War. Imagine how many millions of people were killed in the first half of the 20th century because of the 2 world wars, World War I and World War II. And imagine and compare it with the killings in the later half of the 20th century. There is no comparison. The dreadful of nuclear weapons, the unthinkability of their use. And I repeat, military weapons are not weapons of military use. They are weapons of deterrence. The horror they can demonstrate scares potential military adventurers not to invade those nations which possess nuclear weapons. I do not, absolutely with total honesty, does not justify the evils of Saddam Hussein's regime. But if Iraq has possessed nuclear weapons, had Americans invaded Iraq in grossest violation of the UN resolutions and committed a clear act of aggression against another nation? Nuclear weapons, I have absolutely no doubt, in my opinion, has given a relative sense of security to Pakistan against India, especially after 1970-71. When Pakistanis' perceptions was that because of the new reality in the post-70-71, the conventional military asymmetry, the weak economy, the less industrial development, Pakistan is not in a position to maintain its security dilemma unless it possesses a nuclear weapon. It found, it may be wrong, that the only alternative is to possess nuclear weapons, which are great equalizers, whether we like them or dislike them. Nuclear weapons strongly undercut conventional military superiorities and create a kind of balance, equilibrium if I say, not balance, which nations think very hard to violate the other's national interest. Let me add to it that I'm not saying that nuclear weapons have provided great and comprehensive security to Pakistan. Nuclear weapons absolutely provide not an iota of security against internal threats. The collapse of the Soviet Union is a very classic example before us. If a superpower can collapse, and if Pakistan has internal threats, nuclear weapons absolutely give no security. And I'm not here to preach that. We should look after our internal problem, our weak economy, our poor governance, our corruption, our lack of education, and so many internal aspects of security, traditional and non-conventional aspects of security. Second, Pakistan has the fastest growing nuclear arsenal in the world. It is a fact which cannot be denied. But still, it has an arsenal which is not greater than India. Its potential is that eventually if there is a nuclear arms race which is there, and which I'll come to it, that Pakistan would come to lose this arms race eventually and gradually. The growing restrictions and the discrimination which prevails in the world, Pakistan wants to save itself from the future, that it faces sanctions of any kind in the near future. It should develop as far as possible the wherewithal or dynamics of what they call it, minimum credible deterrence. There is no definition or description of minimum credible deterrence. But the fact is that if a semblance of nuclear deterrent capability is possessed, the adversary's capability is to some extent neutralized. I agree with Dr. Hudbai. I'll put it in a different way. There is a nuclear arms race in South Asia about which we should be worried. It has taken our resources away from development, education, away from welfare of the people, and the kind of economy and the level of poverty which we have. We should not have an unbridled race for developing even conventional military weapons, but not at all nuclear weapons. I'm myself very concerned about the arms race, especially nuclear arms race in South Asia. But to say that Pakistan is leading this arms race or is the instigator of the arms race, that is Professor Hudbai, if he means that, is trying to put a cart before the horse. We are 10 years behind India in developing a nuclear weapons program. It was after 1974 that we actually started developing a nuclear weapons program. Although conceptually in mid-60s, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto has advised Ayub Khan's government that the answer to Pakistan's insecurity is to develop nuclear weapons. And if you read Bhutto's book, Myth of Independence, chapter 9 and chapter 10, he very clearly talks about the development of nuclear deterrence against a possible Indian nuclear threat. So Pakistan is only reacting to what India is doing. And its external security is Indo-centric, as we all know and as we all call it. So India is the leading country. And if Pakistan has a security dilemma vis-a-vis India, which is justified to some extent, why is India acquiring such a huge nuclear arsenal? For prestige? For power? India is a country which called Non-Proliferation Treaty as discriminatory. And India's very famous ambassador in the 18-Nation Disarmament Committee, Ambassador Trivedi, called it NPT. I'll finish. NPT as discriminatory on the part of the P5 and amount to disarming the unarmed. P5 has a right to produce nuclear weapons. The others have no right to nuclear weapons. So we have a word of nuclear weapons haves and nuclear weapons have not, which India did not accept. We supported in principle, but when India refused to join, we refused to join as well. But we were supporters of non-proliferation for a very long time. And what do we get at the end? India gets a nuclear deal, and we get nothing. And that nuclear deal in a direct violation of the NPT's Article 1, that a nuclear weapon state cannot directly, indirectly pass on, transfer material, equipment, technology, anything to do with the development of nuclear weapons. And this is not my opinion. This is the opinion of the Arms Control Association in Washington, D.C. It is the opinion of the great scholars at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, like Perkovich and like many others. Why Pakistan is stopping the FMCT from negotiations? India, you all know, has blocked the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. Just one country which vetoed all other members of the Conference on Disarmament. And now after 10 years, India is giving the favorable treatment, despite being a sole country for blocking the CTBT and the Conference on Disarmament. I'll be finished. And if Pakistan's government policy is that unless we take into account the existing possession of fissile materials, there can be no FMCT. I do not agree with that. My position is that Pakistan should let go the negotiations on the FMCT, and like we have not signed the NPT, if it is not in our national security, we should not sign the FMCT. But we should not block negotiations on that FMCT. I will not, well, somebody else will talk about non-state actors and other things.
Thank you very much. May I now invite Dr. Zulfiqar Khan. Assalamu alaikum. What I'll be doing in next 15-20 minutes is I'll give a broad overview of my book, Nuclear Pakistan, Strategic Dimensions. And in this book, The Nuclear Pakistan, some leading Pakistanis and foreign academics have contributed a diverse perspective on the South Asian nuclear situation. Primarily, it is a critical study of nuclear and deterrence-related security dilemma of Pakistan vis-à-vis India. It outlines the different aspects of its strategic dimensions in view of the growing conventional and strategic asymmetry in South Asia. It moreover critically examines some key issues like the NPT, nuclear command and control structure of Pakistan, ballistic missile defense system, Pakistan's posture of credible minimum deterrence, Kashmir conflicts, Pakistan's approach to biological weapons, and the role of tactical nuclear weapons in the future planning of Pakistan. And ladies and gentlemen, before I outline the salient aspects of the book, I will give a very brief overview of the regional security situation. In fact, the existence of nuclear weapons in South Asia has made a total war less probable between India and Pakistan, as Dr. Cheema had earlier pointed out. In this fluid and ambiguous backdrop, both countries have formulated different divergent strategies to gain maximum advantage over each other. Thereby, the regional strategy of deterrence has created a situation of stability and instability paradox on the subcontinent, which has made bilateral security relations of both countries hostage to their bitter histories. And this changing perception has also evoked a number of relevant questions concerning the stability of bilateral deterrence in the wake of India's growing economic, industrial, diplomatic, and strategic and non-strategic capability to dilute Pakistan's potential to offset
India's apparent plan to enforce its primacy that would enable India to practice more openly the policy of compellence vis-a-vis Pakistan. India and Pakistan's relationship is basically premised on a perception of mutual vulnerability to avert a conflict. The aggressive posture of New Delhi and the absence of arms control agreement mechanism between the two countries have also created a security dilemma in the region. And in fact, the US-India nuclear deal in particular is further growing the Indian conventional capabilities, has apparently enhanced Pakistan's insecurity and thereby strengthening its resolve to sustain qualitative and quantitative preparedness. And India's access to dual-use technologies would obviously negatively impact the stability and thereby erode the bilateral deterrence posture between India and Pakistan. Therefore, it would compel the other state to take requisite measures to improve their defense systems with a view to enhance their national security. As far as the stability of deterrence is concerned, for example, an Indian scholar, Reshmi Kazi, questions the efficacy of the no first use policy of India on the ground that it has little relevance as a strategic tool against Pakistan. And she further on says that it's only a declaratory policy which can be revoked anytime. And let me refocus on the overview of this book. The book basically contains 7 chapters. The first chapter is on tactical nuclear weapons and Pakistan's option of offensive deterrence. And in this chapter, it has been described that the adversary's power to resist can only be broken without fighting once Pakistan possesses and inducts sufficient counter value and counter force capabilities into its strategic calculus. And the second chapter is written by Dr. Zafar Iqbal Cheema, which is on the Pakistan's posture of credible minimum deterrence, current challenges and future efficacy. And in this chapter, the author states that Pakistan's nuclear posture of credible minimum deterrence is now is more than a decade old, that its continued efficacy and credibility has been recently reiterated by the National Command Authority, and its review has become imperative due to significant international developments. And the other chapter is, chapter 3 is written by Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal. It deals with India's ballistic missile defense systems. And in this chapter, he argues that India has been procuring and developing ballistic missile defense systems, and the addition of these missiles in India's arsenal would require Pakistan to take certain countermeasures. And the next chapter is written by Dr. Shaheen Akhtar, and it is on Kashmir conflict. And in this chapter, she critically analyzes the impact of missile defense systems on the prevalent deterrent stability fabric of South Asia. And the chapter 5 is on the evolution of Pakistan's approach to biological weapons. It is written by James Revell and Malcolm Dando. They both are British scholars. And the last chapter of the book is written by Khurshid Khan, and it is on the NPT. And it basically states that Pakistan has always pursued the goals of nuclear non-proliferation at all levels, and he further states that Pakistan might not be in a position to risk its national security interests by signing the NPT. So in essence, I would say the book gives a very diverse perspectives on some of the most contentious strategic issues concerning South Asia by a host of eminent scholars, which would assist in understanding the dynamics of both countries' foreign and security policies. Moreover, it would also provide a significant insight into the emerging Pakistani thinking concerning the role of nuclear weapons in its overall security policy. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I invite the final speaker, Mr. Najmuddin Sheikh.
Thank you, Dr. Hoodbhoy. You also laid out a very rich agenda, which our two academic colleagues addressed very practically. Mine will be the approach of the practitioner rather than that of the academic, so there might be a little difference. But I'd like to start by telling you a story of the post-98 period in which Mr. Talbot, the Deputy Secretary of State, had negotiations with both the Pakistani Foreign Secretary and Mr. Jaswant Singh, who had been nominated for this purpose by the Indian government, on where nuclear matters should go. And one of the things that he mentioned frequently to both was that the United States and the Soviet Union had spent $5.5 trillion in creating and then maintaining their nuclear arsenals, which at their height reached 60,000 warheads. It was enough not for deterrence, it was enough not for mutually assured destruction, it was enough for mutually assured destruction of the earth as we know it 200 times over. And yet that is one of the logics of the nature of this particular beast. The United States had a budget of 295 billion, defense budget of 295 billion in 2000. And the debate in the election campaign at that time was, will it stay at 295 or will it go to 300 billion? Today, there is a debate about whether they can afford to reduce it from 600 billion or not. How does this happen? A military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower talked about exists not only in the conventional military, it also exists in the laboratories, the Livermore laboratories, or in our case, Kahuta, or in the Indian case, Bhabha. These are situations that come into being, there are constituencies that come into being, and then you will have wondrous things appearing, that we have one weapon, now the next one that we're coming up with will be so much better. The fact of the matter is that if we are thinking, I was a proponent, and I will like to acknowledge this proudly, I was a proponent of the fact that Pakistan should carry out nuclear explosions immediately after India did. Because I think that for Pakistan, it was an advantage to be able to demonstrate nuclear capability and to instill in itself that sense of security. But there were some logical next steps that needed to be taken. One of them was that if this is going to be your deterrent, is going to be your main reliance for security, then other elements can be reduced, can be attenuated, and that your armed forces, conventional strength need no longer remain at the level that you wish to maintain it when you thought that a 3-to-1 ratio was necessary in the armed forces. So this is something that should have followed. Second, that when we talk about security, we are talking, and that is why Dr. Hoodbhoy's examples are particularly pertinent, that when we're talking about security, we are talking about more than merely security against external threat or external threat of a particular nature. We are talking about a comprehensive security, which means internal security first and foremost. So if that internal security is missing, frankly, I don't think that there is an association between our development of a nuclear capability and the internal problems that we are now facing. Those internal problems and those forces that came into being and which are now generating those problems are only peripherally, if at all, related to the question of what we have achieved in the nuclear field and the sense of security that this should have engendered in us and should have allowed us to talk with greater confidence to our potential adversary and to seek a resolution of problems in a potentially more confident way than we have done so far. Now, Dr. Hoodboy talked also about, are we going to be the outliers in Geneva in the Committee on Disarmament? I don't think so. I think, frankly, if one looks at this objectively, we have raised a question of stockpiles, but we are not alone. There are other countries which are raising this question, and frankly, I think if you look at the manner in which the agreement, the Indo-US civil nuclear cooperation agreement was worked out, the Indians were equally concerned about preserving their right to expand their stockpile and to go beyond. They have, in fact, even reserved the right to be able to retain these the supplies that they get from abroad if they carry out a nuclear test. Now, this is something that we have to look at. Dr. Chima mentioned the fact that there are going to be developments, the anti-ballistic missile defense, etc. Frankly, in my view, what we have to look for is a deterrent capability which will prevent a commander-in-chief, an Indian commander-in-chief, being able to tell his Prime Minister that I guarantee to you that if we attack Pakistan, not a single nuclear device from Pakistan will hit India. And this, in my view, is impossible even if your arsenal is, as is currently being calculated as between 90 and 110. Incidentally, that does not make us overtake Britain. Britain has 200 submarine-based nuclear warheads. France has 300. And I think that what we have to guard against is the temptation to keep building. Keep building means that you then put at risk the material that you have and the arsenal that you create. Preserving an arsenal is, as you will have noted from the figures from the Soviet Union and the United States, an expensive business. We need a minimum, and we should determine that minimum scientifically and stay with it, rather than being overcome, as has been the case in the past, as has been the case in the United States, as has been the case in the Soviet Union, and as has been the case in France, of building because your scientist says that you're going further. So I think so long as we stay away from this temptation, we should not think that the nuclear capability that we've acquired is bad for us. It is good for us if it is correctly used to give us that sense of security and to allow us to proceed with a reduction in expenses elsewhere and to focus those diverted funds back into the areas where they are needed, education, health, etc. We should also feel more confident about how we deal with the rest of the world. We can persist with our sense of injustice with regard to what the US has done with India, but we must recognize that the US pursues its own policies and pursues its policies for its own ends. Today they talk about non-proliferation, but they are now signing agreements with Jordan and Vietnam, in both of which there is no provision that these two countries will not engage in uranium enrichment. They did that, they set what they called the gold standard when they reached the agreement with the UAE for cooperation in the nuclear field. And yet both these are missing in Vietnam for very clear reasons, that they want Vietnam to be able to develop a capacity which will form part of their particular concept of containing certain powers in that region. So we have to look at ourselves, we have to look at our own interests and to take into account that other people will be doing things in their interest, and these need not necessarily coincide. But again, let me repeat that in terms of the strategic stability of South Asia, I think at the level that we have already reached, we are we should be confident that our security is looked after, and we can then focus on the problems that we have internally and which perhaps have a greater degree of difficulty for us than anything in the external field. Thank you very much.
Some things on which we agree, which is that there are internal problems, and I was struck by Mr. Najmuddin Sheikh's remark that if nuclear weapons can lead to a reduction in spending on conventional arms, well, then they would be a very good thing. However, the facts militate against that. After the nuclear tests of 1998, defense spending on both sides of the border grew enormously, and it has, as Dr. Zafar Iqbal Cheema said, now entered a phase where there is an arms race between India and Pakistan. He said it was not initiated by Pakistan, and I would quite agree with him, but there is an arms race. I was a little disappointed at not having an answer to my third question, which was whether jihadist militant groups which take shelter under the nuclear umbrella will continue to propagate, and whether we might or might not find more Mumbai 3s because of that. I would now like to open the floor for questions from the audience, and please identify yourself and the person you would like to address.
My name is Awad Mustafa. I'm a retired naval officer. Thank you, Mr. Sheikh, for bringing madness into this discussion. It is at the moment a lack of madness between India and Pakistan that poses the biggest danger. Some fool, if he gets into power in either of two countries and cannot withstand the mental pressure of having his finger on the trigger, may say, why don't we carry out a preemptive attack now? Once India-Pakistan develops second strike capability, only then the security arises. There has to be MAD. If there is no MAD, there is extreme danger now.
Thank you.
Okay, it's on. I'm Samir, and I have the one thing that Dr. Hudboy said is that will stupid things like the Kargil operation and the Mumbai attacks go? And he also mentioned very clearly that here we have barely 200 people, while the Defy Pakistan probably has 200,000 people there. And isn't this because of the fact that I would say the right wing and the military have stolen the soul of the nation? When I talk to young people, I hear such absolute crazy jingoism that you wouldn't find maybe 20 years ago. And I think this is a direct, there's a correlation behind that, yes, we have nuclear weapons, we are invulnerable, nobody can attack us. I think we need to talk about that. And Najmuddin Saab, you are very optimistic. No bureaucracy gives up power or resources, whether it's the military or nuclear. Sir, it won't happen until somebody else makes it so.
We'll have one more question before the panel takes it. Dr. Tariq Rahman.
I'd like to know just one thing. Is there any danger of an accident? One.
What?
Of an accident. One. Secondly, how does one actually dispose of the waste material? Does it poison us? And the underlying question is, you say this is a weapon which we can't use, and yet you inject MAD into it, which means you will use it, and then wait for those who are not dead to use it again. I mean, borders have been changing for thousands of years. There is this obsession that borders shouldn't change even if the world comes to an end. To me, this is mad.
Can we have quick responses?
Yeah. I would apologize before I straight away come to the three questions. I think a very important question raised by Professor Hudboy was left, and that was about Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jamaat-ud-Dawa's role and linkage with the state of Pakistan, and eventually they involved in the Mumbai. for my opinion, is against any role to Jamaat-e-Dawa and Lashkar-e-Taiba. First of all, because they affect my life and the life of my children. And I'm a very moderate and a very liberal person who believe fundamental human rights, who believe in the emancipation of women, who believe in the modern education and development. And if they stand against for that, I totally condemn the role these two parties are playing, and in no way I support them. But I honestly do not find a linkage of a nuclear Pakistan and Jamaat-e-Dawa and Lashkar-e-Taiba being created by Professor Hudbhai. Is it because Pakistan has become nuclear, therefore such kind of fundamentalist outfits are being raised? They go beyond since Ziaullah came to power. And they have more to do with Ziaullah's so-called Islamization and the rise of the ulamas or mullahs or whatever you want to call it. And it is linked with the dynamics of the domestic Pakistani politics rather than a nuclear Pakistan. So I do not find a linkage with that.
Can we, yes, please, if you, I'm sorry, you'll have your turn.
Thank you. With regard to the point that Dr. Hudbhai raised, I'd like to endorse what Dr. Cheema said. I think I genuinely, there is nothing more abhorrent. There is nothing which is doing more to erode the fiber of the Pakistan that we want, the Pakistan that the founding fathers envisioned, than the creation of these organizations. But frankly, like Dr. Cheema, I see no link between these organizations. It is not the nuclear overhang under which they are operating. This is what was constantly said, for instance, about Kargil, and one can understand that, but I don't think you can think of these people operating under the nuclear overhang, because that would assume that that is the sort of tacit support they have, that if they are arrested, you will have a nuclear holocaust in the country, and that is not going to happen. Second, I think the question with regard to, if I understood it correctly, that what happens in a nuclear conflict. The whole point is that there should not be a nuclear conflict, and I think one must accept it's difficult. And when you ask the question about accidents, I think we should know that in Pakistan's case, apart from the resources that we utilized ourselves, I think the Americans also provided $100 million to try and ensure that we have the best possible security for the weapons and to safeguard against accidents. But let me also add that in the country in which the most sophisticated means are used, the Americans had 6 nuclear weapons being flown across the country with no awareness at either end of the fact that for 24 hours these weapons were untraceable and they could have fallen. So the prospects of an accident always arise. But the other side that has, I think Dr. Cheema mentioned this, that have nuclear weapons contributed to maintaining a measure of peace? Has the absence of nuclear weapons been the reason why Iraq could be invaded? This is debatable, but I think we need perhaps much of the evidence points in that particular direction. So we should bear that in mind.
We'll have a last round of 3 quick questions, 2 sentences each. One is here, one is there, one is there.
I'll be quick. My name is Andrew, the Canadian High Commission in Islamabad. I have a personal question. It strikes me that the debate and discussion at this panel has reflected much of the debate and the discussion throughout the literary
Quick question, please.
Literature Festival, that there are those who are defending the narrative of Pakistan, that Pakistan is justified in its pursuit of its self-interest, as are other countries, and Pakistan has been a victim of international circumstances. And a second narrative expounded by Ahmed Rashid last night, that Pakistan needs to take responsibility for its own problems. Do you consider this to be a fair characterization of the debate we've just seen? And how do you think, if you do consider that to be a fair characterization, us being able to move beyond this polarization in the debate to be able to advance discussion beyond these poles?
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much, sir. One has to struggle to get an opportunity to ask a question. Can you hear me now, sir? Yeah, thank you very much for giving this opportunity, sir. I'm Adil Sultan, and I work at Strategic Plans Division, which deals with these issues. I didn't want to ask a question, but I think there are certain facts that needs to be corrected. I do respect your opinion because you always profess non-proliferation, but I have little disagreement. But aside that, I'll just correct some misperception about the FMCT. Pakistan has never been the only country opposing FMCT. Since 1995, Pakistan is the only country which has maintained consistent position at the Conference on Disarmament. Other countries, they have changed their position quite often, including the US. Till 2006, US was using this veto power, not the Pakistan. It is only after 2009 that blame has started to come towards Pakistan, which is not right. Quick about the non-state actors. Did US nuclear weapons deter 9/11 to happen? I think if you understand that dynamics, and I fully agree with Najmuddin Sheikh Saab and others, that nuclear weapon is not the solution for all the problems that you refer. Thank you very much.
Yeah, since you referred to me, the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon singled out Pakistan, no other country. So there is something special about us. Next, please.
Thank you, sir. I'm Khatija Sharif, Research Fellow, South Asian Strategic Stability Institute, SASI. My question is for Dr. Cheema. Sir, does nuclear Pakistan necessitates isolation on the international front?
Thank you. Yeah. Me? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Beginning from the last question, I very firmly believe that Pakistan is not isolated, if it is at all. Firstly, I do question the premise of this question, that Pakistan is not so isolated as it is being propagated. But if it is isolated, supposing your question is correct, this is not because of Pakistan's possession of nuclear weapons. It is because Pakistan's involvement in a very complex so-called war on terror, on which there is divergence of perceptions, there's a lack of trust between the parties involved, and each party is now trying to blame each other for an impeding failure of all of them to bring peace to Afghanistan. So Americans are blaming us, we are blaming the Americans, we are blaming the ISAF. We have all failed because of divergence of behavior, divergence of perception to maintain peace in that area. But I don't think Pakistan is being isolated, because if you remember, immediately after 1998, there was an article written by Stobe Talbot, then Secretary of State, in the Foreign Affairs, that India and Pakistan are accepted as a US policy as de facto nuclear weapon states. And we are not looking for denuclearization of either India or Pakistan. The question only is, I think somebody has raised it differently, are Pakistani nuclear weapons safe and secure? Well, I think nobody would know better than Adil Sultani, who himself has declared his association with the...
I think we need to move on, please.
I'd quickly answer one question, and then kindly allow me. I think the problem of our strategic equation, stability, equilibrium in South Asia is because India's objectives are extra-regional, regional, and a great power. Pakistani view is Indo-centric. If India does not agree with Pakistan to any forms of arms control, and its objective for acquiring nuclear weapons are power, prestige, international status, a seat in the UN Security Council, which is the worst discrimination den in the world. This is where India wants to go on the basis of a principle.
We really must move on. We've gone over time.
I think then.
Yes.
Well, I would say that I have a book written lying here outside, which explains the Indian objective for acquiring nuclear weapons. If you can spot out, and that gives in very detail the dynamics of the nuclear deterrence in South Asia.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that in terms of the position in Geneva, I think we made a mistake in taking the lead. We did not need to be the country taking the lead. I can assure you that the Indians are just as wary of the FMCT as we are. And had we stayed in the background, there would have been others who would have taken the lead. The fact that Ban Ki-moon has singled us out flows from the fact that we are talked about as the leader, and we've said that we will stand in splendid isolation if necessary. But we don't need to stand in splendid isolation. And that is why, despite Ban Ki-moon's statement of this nature, the effort to move the negotiations from
I'm so
the
sorry
CD
to cut in,
has not happened.
Mr. Najmuddin. We've actually gone over time by 5 minutes.
This was it. So I have nothing further to say. So.
Okay, so thank you everyone for being here. We've concluded. It's clear that we've not arrived at a resolution or a clear answer to the questions posed at the beginning, but let's leave that for next year. Thank you.